Ming from Ming Effect. I have one of my viewers, and actually more than one, how do I balance my rig? So I'm not going to use all of this on here, but this is basically a lot of the components that go with it. First things first, I'm going to just set up my, my G drive, 1 terabyte drive with the connector. In here I did just order extra little extenders. They're little adapters to go from one to the next. I just put a couple together and that gives me just the right amount of distance to go from the part of the plate here, mounting plate, into here without straining the cable too much. This is really one of the better cables because it's a thin ribbon cable. They don't make them in any other size that I have found other than really large. So otherwise I'd have had them, you know, just a couple more inches would have been great. But this was excellent, so that's set. The stabilizer, Moza. So we're going to get that tripod and open that up. That's always the start. That's the first thing. The rest I have it because I put it in a backpack. I have it loose, so all of these are completely loose. None of them are set, so I'm going to go from 0 so that you can understand and see what I'm doing from a 0 position on the setup. I also have my cable ties. Again, I've dropped it, caught it by this, caught it by the, I have just attached my little strap to it. And this has saved me a lot. We've got the 50mm lens. It's a 25, so it's a 50. And I put Velcro around here. The reason I do that is because when I go and put on my matte box, which is just from a newer shoulder mount shoulder rig, and so I've repurposed it with soft Velcro here so I don't, you know, mar up any of the actual lens casing itself. And then I put a strap of the sharper Velcro around here so that will all come together and it'll hold it solidly, including, you know, with, you know, the 3-panel gates on the outside if I needed to. So that's why there's Velcro on this, because I do that on all of my lenses. That way I can slap a matte box on there really quickly. It's a plastic, so it's really lightweight. It doesn't add too terribly to the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K. One of the other things that you do want to notice is when I put this in here, I do mount it with 2 different screws so that there is no wiggle room on the actual stabilizer, so that especially when you're mounting your follow focus, and that's if you have one. Not everybody has one. I don't often use it. I use it only with the ones that don't allow me focus electronically through the actual lens. So I do have a big SLR lens, which is just a prime lens, really heavy. That I would generally use the follow focus for. But the reason why I had to really put a double screw here to make sure this goes on, because when you're forcing this on, because that SLR lens itself is a real strong pull on its turn, so you really have to push this into it, lock it down, and anytime you do that, you're forcing against the actual mounting plate itself, and so sometimes the camera tilts if it isn't tight enough. And so what I mean by that is that this starts turning off axis with just enough pressure. If that really isn't tight and binding that, that's why the small rig is great. This rig outside here makes it so that you don't have to worry about damaging the actual equipment, which is this camera underneath. So all of the stress you can apply to these screws like crazy is not going to harm the actual camera itself or its mounting positions. So when you have a strong pull, very firm rotation on focus pull, you have to force this into the tread on the gear basically quite a bit more. And if this isn't tight enough, then you're going to have that off axis. So that's just a little hint on the follow focus. So a couple of things you want to make sure of is that you've got your CFast cards, you've got your SD cards, everything is put in there before you mount it up on there, because then you got to sit there and adjust that, pull this out the back, and it becomes a little bit of a hassle. If you can, remember to get those cards in there first, and you won't have to have the hassle of it later on. And you slide that in here. I'm not going to go through all of it. I'm going to assume you have some knowledge of the plates involved. Right off the bat, you can see, because I had it in the backpack all loose, none of this is in position. My familiarity with doing this a lot, I already know that because of how I normally mount my run and gun type gear on this, I'm going to put it around here, about that far away. That just helps stabilize it here so it's not kicking off to one side or the other too much. Then, so that I don't have to worry about this follow focus rod hitting all the time, I know also that based on the type of lens that I have on here, this will come up some. It doesn't matter right now. I will adjust that accordingly. I want it to hang down a little bit more. I prefer to have it not tilting up during any of this because it's a lens and you want to keep your lens safe. During this, of course, when you're doing the stabilizing, a quick rig type setup, you need to have that off. If the weight of this is on here, it will throw it off some. Your balancing will go off. Now also, because I'm familiar with having done this many, many times, I know generally about where it's going to be. I'm going to adjust that. And this is all like loose. This is just kind of set it in place so that I can actually work on this a little bit more efficiently without things being hanging off to one side and whatnot. And here we're working the G drive. I've got Velcro on this. I've heard some people use magnets to mount that. I always have a real big problem with anything magnetic near storage medium. And that terrifies me. So I keep that away from anything possible. It's just the fact that magnetic fields will also influence electrical currents. So that means it's not even just what's going on in here, but it's also the pathway out to your recorder. So Velcro is my friend. And what I do is I kind of double up underneath there, so that provides a little bit of a buffer at the base plate here. It allows me, because I've got it firm enough in there, and because this has a really good rubberized tactile feel, it allows for that to slide really well on there, but have a tackiness. It doesn't just come right off. That allows me to tighten this and put it in place and hold it. So between these two, I actually get it firm on this plate in here. Off the get-go here, because one of my subscribers also pointed out that they used to have this power that comes out of here, be 12 volt. And this is 16.8. So we've got 16.8, and that's the follow focus right there. That's the port for the link line on that. So the 16.8 volt is where I will be using the standard power cord. And you can get really cheaply Amazon. Of course, you know, Blackmagic sells it as well. I typically will put this in after I put my SSD drive on, for reasons of that it just gets in the way. I'm going to bring the cables in on this side, slide it in. It fits really well, almost as if it was meant to fit in there. So in here on the cap end, I'll bring this around here. On the cap end, I just come out and I place it. That's why I have the double little layer down here, so that when I push this on, it will butt up against the plate here so that it keeps it firm. So between the two here, this one in back and the one in front, I can keep that fairly stable front and back. I don't have to worry about that wiggling too far and getting thrown off when the stabilizer is moving. And you can push it in that way a little farther. You'll see that it sets in there nicely. It's in there firm. So you can see that the G drive underneath here also makes it so that your rig isn't so top heavy. So if you have a little bit more weight at the base, You don't have to worry about so much, especially if you're doing some of the shooting where you're running it and you're tilting it like this. You don't want a whole bunch of stuff sitting on top. Now sometimes that's unavoidable if you're using microphones and such up here, and I'll show you how I deal with that as well. But anything that you can place down and under the unit out of the way is a better proposition all around. So I will throw this on and put the cable for power in there. It will draw off of that. Now again, if you look at my other video on that, the Moza Air, I checked with Blackmagic Design. I called up and talked to one of their engineers. It's something I recommend you do on your own too, so to feel comfortable. They're a great company. They have great enthusiastic engineers and people working for them, and it's wonderful to deal with them just all the way around. And if you've used DaVinci Resolve and things like that, you know they're doing top quality stuff. This camera is top quality. I love it. Their rating was 20 volts max coming into this, so you obviously don't want to put in 20 volts power in there, because any fluctuations with energy could, fry your unit. So 16.8 isn't a problem, because not only can I power the SSD off of this, and it's actually just coming off this rig, because once I start putting the power in here, as you can see, I'm going to tuck this up underneath here, and you can slide this. And some say, why don't you put that on first? Well, the amount of time that I've done this, it's actually more efficient to put this in first, because otherwise this slightly gets in the way. That's preference. It's not anything you have to worry about. But you put the power in there, plug that off in onto the side. You're going to just plug the cable, rotate that, and it'll snap and it locks. That's really a nice feature. So off of this plate, which is running off of the 4 batteries in here, that's powering my SSD, it's powering the Blackmagic Design, including any cards that I use in there. And when I actually use this, the follow focus, it will charge that as well through that connector. It will also run phantom power out to my NT-G2 Rode mic through this cable. So it will do all of that, and it'll power all of this off of those batteries and not have a problem. I have not had any power dropping on that whatsoever. In fact, it also charges the battery. I have a battery inside here that actually gets charged as well, so that if the power goes off on the stabilizer, if you've got this balanced pretty well, you aren't going to notice it drop, but your machine won't shut off because you've got that battery on the inside there as a backup. Because if you're shooting something really important and you just need even those last 3 seconds, that'll still keep working. And that's when this power goes out, that will instantly kick in. There's no drop on frames, no drop on anything. Okay, so I'm doing this run and gun style. So this is where minimal stuff on here. If I was going to even strip that down more, I'd pull out the SSD drive and just use the CFast card or the SD card in there, and I'd have even less. But because I want to shoot at higher quality with a lot of footage, I throw the SSD card on there. If I want to use a different type of mic, what I use actually, wireless Go. These, when you're talking minimal, this is the transmitter. Normally you put the receiver on here, which is now being used by the iPhone, and it's running through a lav mic underneath my clothing here. When you want something run and gun, you get a Rode Wireless Go. It's as simple as that goes, because that is so small, lightweight, pop it up on there. The rig here that we've got from Small Rig has a slot for 2, so when you're not using it and you just need it for storage, you can just mount the other, you can mount the transmitter on here just to have it out of the way. It's really cool. This is the Rode Videomic. This has some use on it. I have had this for a long time, thus the hair ties on that to hold that dead cat on. And this also is one of the things that you would use for run and gun. Pop that in, put that on. It's very lightweight and you don't have to worry about it. So again, we're going to go without the mics for the moment. Just bear with me. We're going to go with the run and gun balancing on this. So my main thing is I can see automatically it's tilting to the right a little bit more. So when I go through here, I do two different things. I use my thumb both as a lever. I just kind of push like this, as well as this. So between my two, my index finger and the thumb, I'll just push back slightly. It gives me a little more precision. And when I'm doing it the other way around, I use the thumb as a buffer to stop, and this one as a counter pressure to whatever I'm pressuring here. And that just gets me fine-tuning for this. This part is probably the more finesse requiring, because depending on what you've got up on here, you'll have to finesse this part a little bit more. That is fairly good on that side, so I'm going to leave it like that. Next, you go from the bottom. So right here, this little part, it's actually setting pretty well, but I'm going to have it tilt forward a little bit. And there we go. And all I'm doing is I'm removing this here and sliding the base underneath. This is the locking plate to keep the actual rig on there. And you just leave that alone, and then you slide the plate after that, and you're good. So in here, that looks good. It's not tilting too far forward, not tilting too far the other way. If you had a problem where all of a sudden, you know, it's angled up and, you know, obviously that's not in line with the horizon, that sort of thing, loosen it. Use that little pressure from both the front and the back to tilt it. Just a little nudging here and there, and get it to where it's fairly stable. You don't be too concerned about doing that on the first time, because you're gonna tilt it up and you're gonna have to readjust that again anyway. So get it to where it's fairly stable, come back up here and you can see a lot of swing, okay? So loosen this up, tilt it skyward, and you get it to where it's balancing. I'm doing this really slow and precise. I do this fast normally, and it doesn't take long at all. Tighten it to where it's about there, then go back to the front again. You can see that because it's set there, it's nice and vertical there, we still need to get this off, because we still need to adjust the front because it's tilting too far. And that's why you go back through here, just little iterations until you get it just right. And we're looking at that. That's not too shabby. Now, one thing that will indicate it is if you can aim it and hold it in a certain position and it'll stay there, then you've got it. Right now it's still tilting back a little bit too much, so I'm going to tilt it forward. Ride it forward just a tad. And it's small increments. You don't have to go very far. Go too far one way, it's going to tilt just like that. This isn't too bad here, because now it should stay in pretty much any position. Still tilting forward. Now if you've got the matte box on there, you have to finesse this a little bit, and I will show that later. So we're in here like that, still tilting down, we're good there, good there, good there, okay? That's really all you're looking at. Now you can see it's still listing to the side just a tad, so I'm going to force it back over there, just a little between the two hands, and it won't take too much. Back down. So now that that's working, it's no longer listing to one side. It's got kind of an it's kind of an even setting on that. Next, you're going to work this here. A lot of people will aim it like this, and then they'll try to get it side to side like that to balance that. I don't. I just take it like this, because it's a fairly strong device. What I tend to do is I just tend to go, and again it's tilting too far forward. I'm gonna get this in play here. Slide that back a little bit more. So what I tend to do is I just tend to grab it and I'll tilt it one side or the next. If it's really violently swaying like that, just keeps going out that way, I'm gonna pull it back some. Okay. get it up, set there, turn it this way. Very little movement, very little movement. And that's exactly where you need it. And that's just finessing back and forth until you get it just like that. So when you tilt it, almost no movement whatsoever. Works really well. You just lock that, lock this, everything's good to go. You turn on the unit at that point. 1, 2, 3, it's set. Run this 1, 2, 3, and let it run. And then it auto balances between that, gets a sense for setting its motors properly. And that's it. So you're good to go. So it's on follow focus right now, so it will go exactly where I have it intended. We're setting at 35 there. If I ramp it up to, let's say, 99, this is an almost instant movement to wherever I'm going. It's really functional. It's a great device, and it's so nice that you can do that on the fly if I need to adjust it. Because I know action's coming up, I've got to be able to whip it wherever I need. The other thing that you do have to look at, press the trigger and I go forward. Sometimes you'll get this vibration. In the early days, I didn't know what was going on, so I finagled and moved around with a lot of stuff to figure it out. All you basically do is you go into here, check your gimbal settings, then you go up to motor, and then you go down to power. In power, you do level, and you've got ultra light, light, medium, heavy. You're going to go between any one of those, depending on what you've got on your rig. No matter what's on there, each one of these will provide a different amount of power to the motors. Sometimes if it's overpowered, it gets unbalanced and you'll get that little shake. So you use a little lesser setting. It seems odd, but that's actually what happens. Other times I rarely have had it on the maximum power, but I have had it on ultralight, which is what it's on right now. Now we're going on to a heavier rig. Okay, so I powered this off. When I powered that off, you can see stabilizer held. So when I've got this on, it's not in any way going to affect whatever I just last shot. That's the nice thing about having this powering the unit and then having an extra battery in here that also is charging at the same time. So you're not without your power. So now I'm going to do is I'm going to add the little rig on here so that you can see how this works. And again, it's just Velcro up against Velcro. So I tried to do the soft Velcro on the inside, and we're looking at here. And all I'm going to do, normally I do it from the front, but I want you guys to see it, is I just start tucking it in and tucking it in without touching the lens. Typically I'll put the lens cap on before I do any of this, but again, we want it to do it fast for you. There we go. And as tight as you have this one wrapping around here is how firm this will hold. Now, big tilt forward. So we're going to readjust a couple of things. Slide this back. There we go. And that's good for this, but you can see the tilt is going that way now. So pretty heavy there. So slide it. Again, thumb. If I need to hold this, I'll hold that. Otherwise, it'll be just small movements. This gives me extra pressure so that the thumb doesn't have to overshoot wherever I need. And we do it little increments until we get it. This part is the finesse part. If you overbalance it too far, then you got to go back and forth, and it's just a fine line between that. But this actually isn't too bad right there. So once you get that, lock it in. You can see I'm tilted a little bit too high. But here's where this is going to be a little bit different. So you're looking for a main balance about here on when you set it up a rig like this. If you try to have it to where it won't tilt forward at all or it won't completely go up, it's going to throw things off a tad. you're looking at how you're going to mainly shoot. So if my main shooting is going to be about in this area, meaning on this plane, I'm not going to do a lot of panning up or tilting down, rolling and stuff like that. Then you're going to look for getting the balance in about this plane. Okay, so that's the main thing. Here it's got a little bit of a tilt. So if I go like this, and that becomes a problem if I put the mic on there too. Okay, so we're going like that. I'm going to adjust it here, but you'll see that because this is overbalanced on this side, if I put it too far forward to compensate for this, then what happens is it overbalances too heavy this way, and then this part gets thrown off. So you're just trying to find this medium in between here so that it doesn't have, this is actually pretty good. There you go. You just don't want any violent tilting one way or the other. We're going to do the movement off, tilting off the verticals. So in this line, it's almost the same. There very little. So I won't adjust that during the running of this. Like I said, the motors are really strong on this. It won't have that much of a problem. So turn it on, let it do its auto balance between that. There you go, and we're set. Running it just like that, good to go. Okay, so this is one of the, I'm going to throw an accessory on top here. We're throwing on that video mic, and which is actually a pretty good mic. I mean, it's not bad at all. So it's a good little investment. I actually use it a lot more than I think I would need to. Obviously, it's tilting it forward and tilting it off to the side a tad. So I'm going to adjust the side first just a bit. There we go. And then this tilting, which is going to get too much one way or the other. We're going to just kind of tilt it back. Now this is where it will hit here. So you're looking for the best kind of balance that gets it close to it or just slightly above. And that's by sliding this one. So the big thing is I don't want this to hit. So I'm gonna leave it just enough to where it balances about there. I'll always have it floating just a little higher, even if it's moving slightly and like that. I would still prefer that than it coming back and banging on that. And just experience has shown me that that's preferred for the shooting that I do. This is a little dynamic. So it's not a rigid piece, it's actually floating on here. And you've got something that's going to move with the stabilizer. You may have to bump up the power to the next level. Oftentimes you don't. You just, like I said, right now we're set. Side to side, you really don't have to change that much unless you start putting even more equipment on there. But we'll run this, and then I will do the balancing again. I'll let that happen. Okay, so that's set too. So now I can go on through there and do whatever I need, do all the filming, set that up nicely, run that here, back and forth with the lever itself if I need to, but mostly I'll just run it like that and just do our, love the trigger. I love being able to handle that. This has not given me any problem. The one thing it has done, because this is Florida and humidity, this just keeps slipping off. So I've got to do some spray adhesive on that. But sweaty hands, and because we use it so much, we are gripping that all the time, and that starts coming off. So that's the only complaint that I have about it. Everything else, when you add the matte box on here. It's the same setup. You're just compensating for everything else that you're adding. And again, you're always looking for how am I going to shoot. Now on a 50mm lens like this, which is a 25, so most of you know that because of the crop, this 25mm equates to a 50mm. So that lens on there itself, because it's got that, if it's not a wide angle, so you're not going to see this very much. You can probably have this plate down and pull in the other barn doors as well. The having it with that amount of field of view, so it's not like a wide angle, you can get away with quite a bit. You'll see I can put those doors closed pretty far, and it doesn't get in that at all. And this becomes a problem. You see how close that is? On a wide angle lens, when you're using a 10mm or anything around there, what happens is that comes into frame really quickly. So you have to open those barn doors up pretty high. Or just go without them and just use the frame of the matte box here, which works really well. The only other thing that I say here, on a wide angle lens, you have to push this back almost right up to the edge. It's otherwise even the Velcro will get in the shot. And that's always something to think about, because you don't want to be filming and then all of a sudden realize that line up there that was black, after you've shot, you know, good 10-15 minutes of some good stuff, realize that that line is actually the barn door that was closed because it was in the shot, and you did a wide angle shoot that got in the way, and then you have to reshoot all that. It's not like I'm talking from personal experience or anything, but just letting you know that's stuff that you think about later. But as you can see, this is tilting back pretty heavily, or tilting forward pretty heavily. So again, we adjust. It's just like any of the other adjustments. Get it set like that. This will tilt back. Then you go back over here and adjust here. We're going to bring it down a tad. And again, if I didn't have the mic in here, I could let it rest back up about completely vertical. But right now I want it slightly forward, just a tad. Get it back here, and then we have to tilt it again, just a bit forward. Remember, it's always an iterative adjustment between this one and this one. This one's the fine-tuned one that you just kind of got to really finesse it. It's just very fine movements to get it so that it doesn't go one way or the other. This one, once you get this in place, you're pretty much set. There's very little that you have to do side to side and that sort of thing. Again, the motors are strong. I'm going to tilt this a bit. I will mount with this. This is another one from Small Rig. This is like perfect. These are so enjoyable to use. You lock that down, man, it's locked. And it's heavier than you think. It's a really great build. And so you can put anything on there. I've got basically a cold shoe mount adapter, so I can put my NTG on here. I've had this for a number of years. I've got a 10-year warranty. It has not failed me. Typically we'll lock this up. That way we've got the rig that we can turn on here. And turn it farther than you think. And there. Then you get it to where you need. You're going to adjust this accordingly. But once you get it here, you literally just turn it wherever you need. Then you just lock that in, and that's solid. It's really cool. I just love that little device. Then you throw on your mic, and then you just readjust accordingly. So this, again, I can put it however I need for the shoot. And just so that's out of the way, because sometimes if I'm using the follow focus, that will get in the way. This is going to throw off your rig a little bit. I do not balance it with this on. If I do, I will get this all set up so that it's in position already, so that it's balanced side where I need it. I'll get that done first. Then I will put on the extra cable. This adds a little weight to it. And we will throw that on. And what I'll do, as you can see how it's starting to tilt that way, is I will lift this so that it has almost a neutral position on there. And I'll get an idea for how much it's tilting one way or the other. Right now it's going to have a little bit of a tilt that way, so I'm going to bring it back over here to counter for that, just a little bit. And you can see that in here, does it hold going forward? No. So I'm going to bring that forward a little bit more so that the weight is distributed better. Just a bit. Once you start adding extra stuff like this, then it becomes a little bit more of a problem, more of a finesse thing. So now that I've got this in here and I'm holding this like that, it's holding fairly well. I don't care too much about, like I said, the motors are powerful on this. And yes, if you overtax them over too long a time, you'll shorten the life of the motors. But I have a feeling these little buggers are going to last a long time. I've used a lot of stabilizers over the years, and they are really, they're made of high quality components. They take some torture and they keep going. So in here, once I've got this like that, my little weight here, I'm just holding it like that. If I sat there and did this, that would throw off all of the stuff, because this is a flexible thing going back here. When you're moving, it's going to be in different positions, things like that. So you go for, you know, just about where it would be if you were holding it here so that this was coming in off the regular line. You didn't have to worry about, you know, there's no pressure, no tilting, and no pulling down. If anything, you would pull this that way a little bit more. You would run the rig just a tad, and just to compensate for the extra load hanging off this side. And that's it. Then you just run the power back up on here, let it do its thing again in the balancing, and during the balancing I will hold this, the auto tuning, and we'll let that take care of that. I'll be flexible here. And the last one. Good. So now I've got the rig all set, and there are different times I may put this, you know, tighter with Velcro, of course. I'll put that up on there so that this is actually setting closer to that. And so that way I don't have this actually hanging out here. I actually have it Velcroed to this, and it makes it a little bit better. But that's all set, and that's how I would do my rig. And again, I can put on the other barn doors on that side, and that's going to keep that closed off. It's a simple balancing rig, balancing setup. This is really forgiving. If anything, the more stuff you add, just bump it up to the next power level. And the only reason that you're going to play with the power levels on that is just as you're moving it like forward when you're holding the trigger, and you get that vibration, or it's just sitting here and vibrating, just bump the motor up or lower. You've got to test it, because sometimes it goes in the other direction, and it works really well. We use this a ton. We got a new short film coming out. We've been working on that for some time. Stay tuned to the channel, because I'm going to show you all the stuff we went through with the crew, and a little behind the scenes stuff as well. That's coming. I'm actually working on the final post-production. If you have any questions about this rig, let me know. If you have things that you want to know that I didn't cover, because there's always something that your type of shooting is going to, that we may have already done. It's just I'm not addressing it here. I'm just hitting what my one viewer asked. If you have other questions that you would like to know about the process of the shooting, how to handle it, how we actually use it, things like that, I can go into that. Put it down in the comments. We will absolutely go through that, listen to them. We love hearing your suggestions, and we've got the equipment, so we're going to work for you. Let us know what you want.